At maximum capacity, this theater holds exactly 455 people. What you're looking at is a diagram with all 455 seats filled. Now, here is a diagram of the theater at 20% capacity. This is how common neurodivergence is within the human population. Let's imagine that these seats you are sitting in represent the global population. This would mean each seat would represent a little over 3 million people, summing to a total of 1.78 billion people who are neurodivergent. From Albert Einstein to Michael Jordan to Trevor Noah and to Greta Thunberg, I bet some of your favorite historical figures and celebrities are neurodivergent themselves. I even bet you know someone who is neurodivergent, whether they are diagnosed or not. It is everywhere in our world. Yet, neurodivergent individuals are feeling a lot more like this: lonely, lost, confused, misplaced. These are just a few of the words fellow neurodivergent students have candidly shared with me about their experiences with neurodiversity. Now, before I go on, I want to circle back to the word neurodiversity. Harvard Medical School defines neurodiversity as the idea that humans interact with and experience the world around them in many different ways. There is no one right way of thinking, learning, or behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. Now, I believe the best way for me to share the neurodivergent experience story with you all is to go back 10 years to my 8-year-old self. From having vulnerable conversations with fellow neurodivergent learners, I've identified a pretty clear trend. At one point in our education, social life, or upbringing, a switch was flipped. Whether this moment was when we learned to read and write, when we were told to sit still and focus, when we were let out for recess and had to learn to navigate social dynamics, or when, for reasons we couldn't explain, didn't fit in with the rest of our peers. From this moment on, the way in which we perceived and viewed the world around us was forever changed. I want to start off by sharing with you all what this moment was for me. At 8 years old, my challenges with reading and spelling consumed a large part of my life. I harbored a fear of being called on to read aloud and spell words, scared of being laughed at for inevitably stumbling through my sentences and incorrectly identifying letters. One day in 2nd grade, I was called on to spell the word question. Now, just the week prior, my class had gone over the word spelling and origin, yet I was still struggling with its second letter. Spell the word question, Ivy, my teacher asked me. My heart instantly dropped. With a shaky voice, I shared, Q-W-E-S-T-O-N. My teacher sighed and shook her head. No, Ivy, you're wrong. Again, question, she repeated in a slightly more demeaning tone. Okay, I thought to myself, let's try something different. Q-W-E-S-T-E-N, I shared in a slightly more hushed tone. No, Ivy, you're wrong. Again. This exchange repeated about 6 times over until my teacher eventually gave in, telling me the spelling of the word. No matter how insignificant this moment was to her, it has stuck with me 10 years later. Just like that, the trajectory of my education was changed. This interaction unlocked the door to an unending host of questions about my brain and myself. Why is spelling so hard for me? Why can't I read like the rest of my peers? What is wrong with the way my brain works? And what is wrong with me? I carried these questions with me throughout lower school and middle school. Evidently, that did a lot for my self-esteem and learning. I was often riddled with anxiety in my classes, felt like the odd one out amongst my peers, and regularly struggled to complete homework assignments in the allotted time. During this time, I also grew increasingly lonely. For one reason or another, I internalized that I was the only one facing these obstacles, and that because of this, I had to do everything in my wheelhouse to make these differences go unnoticed. While it came at a cost, I completely flew under the radar. Fast forward to 7th grade, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. I learned why reading was hard for me, and why my brain didn't necessarily function like the rest of my classmates. However, the initial relief this diagnosis gave me quickly rushed away. Soon, a whole new set of questions flooded my mind. How do I advocate for the audio version of reading materials? How do I explain to my friends that it's fair I'm given extra time on tests? As I struggle to navigate the social stigma of dyslexia, more and more I place the blame on myself. By the time I started high school, I was overworking myself at a rate that was just not sustainable. I had to self-advocate and put in the work to understand how I learn. I sought out help from Miss Montgomery, the head of my high school's Learning Strategy Center, which is a support system for neurodivergent students that helps debunk the stigma of neurodiversity and also teaches important self-advocacy skills and metacognitive awareness. The support and guidance I received was life-changing. I learned how to become the best self-advocate possible, and I grew to internalize that as a student, it is my fundamental right to understand what I'm learning. Soon, I began to thrive at all levels of the classroom because I was finally learning in the ways my brain was designed for. As I grew more and more involved with the Learning Strategy Center community, my world started to look a lot more like this. I discovered I was not alone. And what's more is that as I forged connections with fellow neurodivergent students, I realized that my feelings of loneliness and confusion were not unique. In fact, they were almost universal amongst the neurodivergent community. This discovery ignited a strong passion within me to understand why this was the case. Over the past 2 years, I've dedicated my time to neurodiversity advocacy in the pursuit of this answer. Let me share with you all what I found. The traditional education system is full of rigid parameters that cater to neurotypical learners. Neurotypical meaning anyone who isn't neurodivergent. Let's take the traditional classroom, for example. For some, the classroom is a place of creativity, curiosity, and adventure, while for others, it's a constant reminder that they don't fit in. Classroom environments can be overstimulating. Crowded spaces, bright lights, and loud noises. Materials are often taught in minimal formats, long lectures or reading assignments without access to audio versions. Students are assessed on their understanding based off timed tests. Tests that don't accommodate for students who struggle with testing anxiety, have difficulty reading the actual questions, and regularly make transcription and spelling errors. I find myself asking these questions. Why must students be timed on tests? How does answering 10 questions within 10 minutes prove anything about their actual knowledge of a given topic? Why must students be forced to write out long essays by hand? How does manually writing something out versus typing it on a computer change anything about the ideas showcased? Why must students be forced to read a print book? How does reading something versus listening to the audio version change anything about the material that you're absorbing? So, how does all this impact neurodivergent learners? Well, from my research and experience, there's a pretty clear trend. Before getting diagnosed, students feel lost in the classroom. Thereafter, they experience immense stigma as they struggle to navigate their needs and accommodations. This is a shared story for almost 20% of the population. This is a story that goes unnoticed and highly stigmatized. This is a story that I feel strongly about sharing with the world. About this time last year, I set out on a path to create a documentary titled From Stigma to Strength, the Neurodiversity Project. By sitting down with fellow neurodivergent students, a learning specialist, and a neuropsychologist, I aim to spread awareness about the neurodivergent experience and shed light on the need for systemic change within the education system. This film is now being screened at schools all across the Bay Area. Slowly but surely, I'm working to rewrite the narrative of neurodiversity and help neurodivergent students like myself feel both seen and heard in the process. Now, the closing message of this documentary is very similar to what I want to leave you all with today. Let's go back to the diagram of the theater at 20% capacity. Well, it turns out this individual at the bottom left here is a hands-on learner. They are extraordinarily creative and a talented problem solver. They also have dyslexia. And if we move a little bit over to the right here, this individual has a miraculous memory and an innate drive to dive deep when it comes to the things they care about. This individual is also autistic. And if we look at one more individual over here at the top left, this individual has a high emotional intelligence and is exceptionally well-spoken. They also have ADHD. What I'm trying to show you all here is that neurodiversity adds value to our communities. We need to start structuring our social and educational systems in ways that enhances and supports neurodivergence. We need to debunk our false myths and stereotypes about neurodivergent conditions and stop dictating what others' diagnoses can and can't look like for them. We need to start embracing these differences and the unique perspectives they bring to the table. Thank you.